Have you ever sat back and, just watched a 3-year-old pick up a smartphone or a tablet?
Oh, yeah. It is honestly a little bit wild.
Right. I mean, they cannot tie their shoes. They cannot read a single word. They basically barely know their own address.
Yeah.
But they are swiping, they're tapping, they're, navigating through multiple nested menus just to find their favorite video.
Yeah.
And they do it all with this effortless, almost instinctual grace.
It really is something to witness. It is as if they speak the language natively before they can even, speak English.
Exactly. But then compare that to an older adult, someone with maybe 60, 70, or 80 years of rich, complex life experience. They've navigated entire careers, raised families, managed finances, maybe even lived through monumental historical shifts.
Oh, absolutely. Tons of lived experience.
Yeah. Yet, when faced with that exact same sleek little device, they might struggle just to figure out, how to send a text message or adjust the volume. You sit there and think, how does that make any sense?
It's a huge paradox.
It really is. How does the person with almost zero life experience master this instantly, while the person with a lifetime of accumulated knowledge just struggles? Well, our mission for this deep dive is to explore a truly radical explanation for this everyday mystery.
And to do that, we are drawing on a fascinating philosophical essay. It was written in May of 2023 by a writer named Feng, and it's titled The Relationship Between Collective Subconscious and Individual Consciousness.
That's a deep title.
It is, yeah. But what is brilliant about this piece is that it takes this very simple, mundane observation about the generational technology gap, and it basically uses it as a wedge to crack open some massive, fundamental questions about the human mind.
Which is exactly why I'm so excited to get into this.
Yeah.
Because, this is not just an exploration of why a grandparent cannot use an iPad. This essay uses that technological gap to expose the hidden, unseen forces that might actually be controlling almost every single decision you make on a daily basis.
And that is the central tension we are going to explore today.
Yeah.
I mean, we all inherently like to believe we are the masters of our own minds, charting our own independent course through life.
Of course we do.
Right. But the core argument we are looking at suggests there's a quiet, ongoing battle between our individual consciousness and massive, unseen collective forces. And, well, if we look closely at how we operate, the individual is usually losing that battle.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start right where the premise starts, with that immediate puzzle. Why do young people adapt to new tech so easily while older people hit a brick wall?
Right.
Now, my initial thought, and I think what a lot of people would naturally assume, is just biological degradation. Brain's age, neuroplasticity decreases.
That's a standard scientific assumption, yeah.
Exactly. But the argument here takes a totally different, almost counterintuitive angle. It points to the knowledge itself as the core problem. And I have to, push back on that for a second, because from the time we are in kindergarten, we're told that knowledge is power. We spend decades accumulating it. How can having more knowledge fundamentally make us worse at learning something new?
It feels backwards, doesn't it?
Totally backwards.
But the philosophy here argues that it is precisely the accumulation of that knowledge that becomes an insurmountable obstacle. Think about the underlying mechanism. The apparent explanation is that as a person ages, comprehending new data just physically gets harder.
Right.
But the deeper psychological mechanism is that their existing knowledge creates these deeply ingrained barriers in their consciousness. Over decades, they have already firmly defined exactly how the world works, what the rules are, and how things ought to be done.
Oh, that makes me think of an analogy. Imagine your mind is a room. When you're a toddler, that room is basically empty. There is zero furniture.
Blank slate.
Exactly. So when someone hands you a shiny new object, like a piece of futuristic smartphone technology, you just toss it right in the middle of the room. There's plenty of space for it to exist.
Right. No obstruction.
But an older adult's mind is like a house that has been fully furnished and meticulously decorated over 50 years. And it's not just full. Every single piece of antique furniture is bolted to the floor.
Wow, yes.
You try to bring in this weird, sleek, modern new tech device, and there's literally nowhere to put it without unbolting and dismantling your entire worldview. The toddler's room is on casters. They can reconfigure it instantly. But the adult has to fight the heavy bolted furniture of their own experience.
That is a perfect way to visualize the friction. And, if we want to give that friction a formal name, we can frame it using the principle of entropy.
Wait, entropy, like the thermodynamic physics concept? The idea that things naturally decline into disorder.
Precisely. In physics, entropy is the gradual decline into disorder in a closed system. But if we apply the principle of entropy to the human mind, it works like this. When you close the system by deciding you already know how the world works, new information cannot enter to organize it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the more closed the system is, the more rigid and resistant to change it becomes. An older mind, filled to the brim with existing knowledge, established procedures, and, bolted down furniture, effectively becomes a closed system.
So it's actively blocking new things.
Exactly. It actively resists accepting new technologies because doing so creates immense cognitive friction. It has lost its openness. Conversely, a younger person's mind, without those ingrained barriers, operates as an open system. Open systems are inherently more flexible, dynamic, and capable of processing the unfamiliar.
So the toddler's an open system, naturally absorbing raw data. And the adult is a closed system, exhausting their energy just defending their borders against anything new.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this phenomenon does not just exist at the individual level. There is a fascinating parallel here to entire societies and civilizations.
Wait, really? How so?
Think about nations or ethnicities that have very long, deep, heavily documented histories. From an evolutionary standpoint, you might think they have an advantage.
Yeah, you'd think they have all the answers figured out.
Exactly. But practically, they tend to have much weaker innovation capabilities. They suffer from the exact same historical entropy as the older adult's mind.
Oh, wow. That makes total sense. An entire ancient civilization can essentially be the elderly person staring confusedly at the smartphones.
Spot on.
They are so bogged down by the massive accumulation of their own traditions, their ancient laws, their established ways of doing things, that the entire society becomes a closed loop. The heavier the history, the harder it is to pivot.
Exactly. The heavy weight of their established traditions turns them into closed systems, making them massive obstacles to societal progress. And, that dynamic sets the stage for a much more unsettling question. Because if individuals inevitably become these rigid, closed-off systems as they accumulate history, what actually happens when you take millions of these rigid individuals and bind them together in a society?
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the necessary question to ask is, do any of us actually think for ourselves?
It's a tough question.
It is. I mean, we all have an ego. We all want to say yes. But the bold claim we are looking at today is that true independent thinkers are incredibly rare. Like 1 in 1,000 rare.
Very rare.
The vast majority of us are merely echoing something else. But if you and I aren't actually forming our own thoughts, what exactly is operating the machinery in our heads?
The mechanism driving the machinery is what is referred to as the collective subconscious. And to understand how powerful and pervasive this is, there is a brilliant metaphor drawn from rural village life. It goes like this: 1 dog barks at a shadow, and 100 dogs bark in response.
That is such a vivid image. Let's break down the sensory experience of that.
Okay, imagine a rural village in the dead of night. It is pitch black and completely silent.
Right.
Suddenly, one single dog at the edge of town sees something. Maybe it is a stranger passing by, maybe it is just a weird shadow cast by the moon. But that first dog starts barking frantically.
Naturally.
Instantly, the dog next door hears it and starts barking. Then the dogs across the street, within seconds, all 100 dogs in the village are going absolutely crazy.
It would be deafening.
Exactly. But the crucial mechanical point here is that the first dog actually used its senses. It saw a stimulus and reacted.
Right.
But the other 99 dogs, they did not see a stranger. They did not see a shadow. They are entirely blind to the original cause. They are merely responding to the noise of the collective.
So they are just echoing the bark. They have absolutely no idea what the threat actually is, but they feel the exact same aggression and urgency as the first dog.
And that is exactly how we operate on a societal scale. We like to believe our reactions are based on our own sensory input and logical deduction, but usually we are just the 47th dog barking at the noise.
Man, that's humbling.
Think about how this plays out in culture. When a mainstream culture dominates, any new non-mainstream idea that emerges is almost instantly criticized and attacked by the majority.
Oh, all the time.
Right, but not because each individual citizen has deeply analyzed the non-mainstream culture, weighed its pros and cons, and found it logically lacking. They attack it simply because the collective subconscious is already barking at it.
It's the ultimate herd mentality. It completely bypasses critical thinking. There's another great example of this regarding group behavior, right? Something as personal as worship or reverence.
Yes, think about how quickly reverence spreads in a crowd. In a group setting, if a few people suddenly fall to their knees and begin to worship a certain figure or cry or show extreme deference, the people around them will very often instinctively follow suit.
Just automatically.
They will kneel without even consciously processing why they are doing it. The sheer gravitational pull of the collective subconscious completely overrides the individual's rational brain.
That is a terrifying thought. It implies that that feeling of comfortable agreement, when you nod along with the crowd and feel like you are on the right side of history, is actually a warning sign.
Exactly.
You think you evaluated the crowd's position and found it logically sound. But in reality, you are just the 100th dog. It makes you wonder how deep this programming goes. Does it just affect our opinions on pop culture, or does it go down to the bedrock of our morals?
What's fascinating here is that the collective subconscious has absolute dictatorial power over our morality. It completely defines the boundaries of what we perceive as good or bad.
Really, our entire moral compass?
Yes. Think about the logic of the herd. If the underlying collective subconscious of a society happens to be deeply selfish and self-serving, then a genuine act of true selflessness will not be celebrated. It will actually be viewed by the group as rebellious, suspicious, or fundamentally wrong.
Wow.
Conversely, if the collective mindset is genuinely selfless, selfish behavior is naturally suppressed by the herd. The collective subconscious writes the code for our moral compass.
So the collective subconscious is like an invisible electric fence. You do not even know it is there until you try to cross it with an original thought, and then you get shocked by the judgment of the herd.
That's a great way to put it.
When we make choices, we truly feel the illusion of agency. We feel like we're weighing the options. But if we trace our decisions back to their absolute origins, they rarely escape the boundaries of this collective programming. We are essentially running on a pre-installed operating system.
Which forces us to look at the inevitable consequences of running on that software. If the collective subconscious is dictating the actions of the 99 blind dogs barking at shadows, where does that collective momentum ultimately lead the herd?
So what does this all mean practically? If I'm trying to navigate my life, my career, my relationships, and I realize that going with the flow is just echoing a barking dog, what is the alternative? I mean, wait, if standing against the crowd means getting attacked by the herd, how does anyone survive that immense cognitive and social friction without just giving up? It seems like an impossible way to live.
This raises an important question. And that is exactly the crisis this philosophy tries to solve, and it does so by pulling in some very heavy ancient wisdom. And it uses these historical references not as rigid theological mandates, but as deep psychological warnings about the nature of crowds and human destination.
Okay, so if the path of the herd is flawed, there must be some kind of mental armor for taking the alternative road. What is the framework here?
The framework starts with a famous warning from Jesus Christ regarding the broad road and the narrow gate. The underlying philosophy is this: enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it.
And when we map that onto the idea of the collective subconscious, the meaning becomes incredibly stark. The broad road is just another name for the collective subconscious.
Exactly. The path that the overwhelming majority follows is, by definition, driven by the collective subconscious. Now, let's look at the mechanism of why so many people choose it.
Because it's easy.
Because it feels incredibly safe. If your behavior, your career choices, and your morals perfectly align with the will of the majority, your journey will naturally be smoother. You face zero social friction. It is easier because you aren't fighting the current. You are barking in unison with the other dogs, and that creates a very comforting sense of belonging.
But the destination of that frictionless road is destruction. Because a closed system inevitably succumbs to entropy. It decays.
Precisely. On the other hand, if you actively ensure your actions consistently diverge from the masses, you are going to encounter massive resistance. You will face misunderstanding, ridicule, and difficulty. The journey will be incredibly hard, but the destination of that difficult, friction-filled path is life.
Life.
Yes. By resisting the closed loop of the collective, you force your mind to remain an open system.
It's the ultimate paradox. The path that feels psychologically safe is actually fatal to the individual spirit. And the path that feels dangerous and fraught with constant resistance is the only one that actually preserves your ability to truly live. But, man, choosing that narrow road requires putting up with a lot. You are going to be judged constantly. You will look like a failure to the herd.
And that is where the mental armor comes in. To survive that friction, the philosophy layers in the ancient wisdom of the celestial lozi. It directly addresses the crushing self-doubt that creeps in when you face the disdain of the majority.
How does Leslie frame this survival tactic?
It is about actively embracing the perspective that the crowd will never understand you and finding power in that. One of the core quotes is, "The common people are bright. I alone am dull. The common people are clear. I alone am confused."
That is fascinating. He's almost bragging about looking foolish to the majority. He is weaponizing their disdain.
Yes, it is the conscious acceptance of looking like an outlier. Another concept Lao Tzu introduces is know the male, but keep to the female. Become the ravine of the world. Know the white, but keep to the black. Become the model of the world. Know honor, but keep to disgrace. Become the valley of the world.
Okay, keep to disgrace. That is a tough concept to internalize. I mean, knowing white but keeping to black sounds beautifully poetic, but how does someone actually apply that to making decisions in the modern world? What is the practical mechanism of keeping to disgrace?
It translates into very actionable, counterintuitive choices. It means actively seeking out the spaces the collective subconscious abandons. Practically, it means when the herd rushes to the city chasing status, you go to the countryside.
Okay.
When everyone else focuses entirely on the practical, the immediate, the material wealth, you dedicate your energy to the abstract, the philosophical, the unseen. The ultimate key here is the wisdom of disgrace. It is the absolute refusal to let the collective subconscious dictate your choices, even if it means you look dull, confused, or disgraced to the rest of the world.
I see. So it's not just about being a contrarian for the fun of it or being a rebel without a cause. It's a calculated survival tactic for your consciousness. You go to the countryside not to be annoying, but because you recognize the city is the broad road to destruction.
Exactly.
You endure the disdain of the barking dogs because you know that joining their chorus means giving up your individual mind. It is a daily active resistance against the entropy of the soul.
Exactly. You are purposefully keeping your system open by refusing to bolt down the furniture.
Okay, this is a heavy realization, but we need to circle all the way back to the very beginning.
Oh, to the toddler.
Yes, we started this whole deep dive talking about a toddler effortlessly swiping on an iPad. And we have just spent the last 15 minutes establishing that the collective subconscious is this ancient, rigid, heavy, herd-like force that traps humanity on the broad road of history.
Yes, the ultimate closed system.
Right, so here's the universal plot twist. If the collective subconscious is that rigid, and that stuck in its ways, and that resistant to new information, it mathematically cannot be the force that is teaching 3-year-olds how to seamlessly adapt to brand new cutting-edge technology.
Not a chance.
The herd does not know how to use the iPad either. The 80-year-old represents the peak accumulation of the collective subconscious, and they are totally lost. So if the collective subconscious isn't guiding this incredible phenomenon of youth adaptability, what invisible hand actually is?
That brings us to the final, profound conclusion of this philosophical framework. Because we have logically ruled out the software of human history, the collective subconscious, there must be a base-level operating system we're all born with.
A completely different system.
Right, a force that drives this unconditioned adaptability. And that force is identified as universal consciousness.
Universal consciousness. Not collective human history, but something universal.
Correct. Think about the logic here. The emergence of any widespread phenomenon requires a mechanism, an invisible hand guiding it. We see this massive global phenomenon of very young children naturally adept at operating highly complex electronic devices. We have proven that this adaptability falls completely outside the rigid boundaries of the human collective subconscious.
Right, because they don't have the bolted-down furniture.
Exactly. Therefore, there must be a force entirely beyond human history at work. It is the raw, unconditioned nature of reality itself.
It is basically the factory settings of the human mind. If the collective subconscious is the buggy, outdated software patch that society installs on you over decades, the patch that eventually crashes when you try to open a new program, the universal consciousness is the sleek, open-source cloud network that children are tapped directly into the moment they arrive.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Universal consciousness serves as the ultimate open system. It acts as the invisible hand driving youth toward progress, completely bypassing the rigid roadblocks, the cognitive friction, and the heavy historical baggage of human habit.
Wow.
It is naturally wired for adaptation. Now, fully exploring the vast academic and spiritual depths of what universal consciousness actually is requires an entirely separate, massive discussion, which this specific philosophy leaves for another time. But its function here is perfectly clear. It is the pure source of vibrancy and progress, entirely unburdened by the barking dogs of our past.
Man, what an incredible intellectual journey this takes us on. We started with the most mundane observation possible, toddlers and iPads. From there, we unpacked the psychological entropy of the aging mind, where accumulated knowledge actually traps us in a closed loop.
The bolted furniture.
Right. Then we waded into the echoing barks of the village dogs, realizing the terrifying fact that the collective subconscious is likely dictating every moral and practical choice we make. We stared down the reality of the broad road that feels so comforting but leads straight to decay, and learned that to find true, vibrant life, we have to embrace the friction of the narrow gate, the wisdom of looking foolish to the crowd. And finally, we arrived at this incredibly glimmer of hope, the universal consciousness, that baseline open system driving unburdened youth toward the future.
It provides a profoundly disruptive framework for viewing how we interact with knowledge, with technology, and with each other. And it forces us to apply a critical lens to our own daily routines. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you to mull over today, building purely on the architecture of these concepts.
I am ready. Let's hear it.
If young people arrive in this world naturally tapped into this vibrant, open system of universal consciousness, but the sheer process of aging, accumulating knowledge, and seeking social comfort slowly inevitably traps us in the rigid collective subconscious, at what exact moment in your life do you cross that line?
Oh, wow.
When does your mind bolt the furniture to the floor? And perhaps more urgently, the next time you find yourself agreeing completely with the majority, the next time your choices feel perfectly safe, smooth, and validated by the crowd, how will you know for sure if you are actively choosing your own path, or if you are simply the 101st dog blindly barking at a shadow?
That is a question that is going to fundamentally change how I look at my own decisions. Thank you so much for bringing your curiosity and your time to this deep dive. We love unpacking these hidden mechanics of the world with you, and we will catch you on the next one.